So thank you again for joining us for our session on school-based anxiety and helping kids cope. Our speaker today is Chessie Brittain, and she'll tell us more about herself as we go, but Chessie is a master's candidate in clinical mental health counseling. And so she has some wonderful things to share with us about anxiety and helping kids cope. Chessie, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to get to share with you guys. I was really excited whenever Sharon reached out and asked me to present on this topic. Um, I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. So, our title's pretty self-explanatory. We're talking about school-related anxiety, which your kids have if they're in school now. They've been in school for a couple months at least. And you may have seen some anxiety start to emerge. It may be disrupting their ability to attend or stay at school. So hopefully we'll cover some strategies that you can apply and use with your own kiddos. Let's see if my slides will move. Okay, so our agenda today, we're going to go over a few different things. First, I just want to look at anxiety generally, clarify some of the words and terms that I'm going to be using. We'll look at what are the signs that your child is experiencing anxiety? What are some of the symptoms of anxiety? How to talk to your kids about anxiety, some crisis intervention skills because anxiety can result in crisis moments like tantrums, meltdowns, panic attacks. So, giving you a few tools that you could use when things do escalate. And then we'll camp out talking about some really practical tools that are helpful for kids that have anxiety about school. We'll look at some coping skills that you can actually use for yourself, which is really important whenever you're trying to help your kiddo overcome anxiety. And then some tools that you can teach your child and do alongside them. And then we'll close looking at some resources and hopefully have some time to take some questions and dive a little bit deeper. So we'll be looking fairly generally at anxiety, and then hopefully in our Q&A time, we'll be able to talk more specifically about some of your unique needs and questions. A little bit about me. I did my undergrad in psychology and counseling. I am now a graduate student of clinical mental health counseling. I'm under the supervision of Dr. Kelly Falterman. So I'm not a licensed counselor yet, but she is, and she works in a school as a school counselor. So we talked a lot about this topic over the last couple of weeks. And I'm also an ABA line technician. So the picture that I've included here is of me with one of my kiddos who has since gone on to do amazing things and go to school, and she's loving it. But in my time that I spent with her, we talked a lot about anxiety because she had some very big emotions. And with autism, sometimes the expression of those emotions can be really big and really loud and seem excessive, but a lot of it had to do with not having the language or the coping skills to address some of the anxiety she was feeling. And once she developed those, we saw a lot of improvement in her ability to relate to her peers and sit still for circle time and answer questions. And it was just a really sweet time of getting to work with her. I love the kids that I work with. They're all between the ages of 2 to 6, and they all have an autism diagnosis. Their needs vary. And I like the saying that you may have heard, if you've met one kiddo with autism, then you've met one kiddo with autism because their needs are so diverse. And I'm sure when you think of your own kid, you can think about how unique their needs are and the challenges that they face. So let's talk about anxiety generally. So, first, I want to start with this: anxiety is not a bad thing. So, if anybody has seen the movie Inside Out, the sequel, Inside Out 2, we have our little character Anxiety. And when she shows up, she kind of disrupts things. And our girl, Riley, is not able to perform the way she wants to or engage with her peers the way she wants to because anxiety gets a little extreme and anxiety starts messing things up. But what we learn by the end of the movie is that anxiety was actually just trying to keep her safe. And when anxiety is healthy and it's at a regular level, anxiety is a really good thing because it does keep us aware of our surroundings. It alerts us to danger. It tells us that we need to move faster or pay closer attention. So, I have anxiety about public speaking. And when I feel anxiety, I know, hey, this is a cue that I need to pay attention. Maybe I need to take some more time to prepare. Um, and when it's healthy, it's actually a motivational emotion that we feel. Now, when anxiety gets overworked, it can get burnout. And with our kiddos, sometimes they don't know what anxiety feels like. So it can be scary and overwhelming to them. So when we talk about helping our kids with anxiety, we're not talking about getting rid of anxiety. We're just talking about helping them ride the wave of anxiety, giving them some tools and resources to help them understand it a little bit better, and ultimately harness anxiety in a way that's normative, healthier, and more functional. So let's talk about the differences there. So when I say healthy anxiety, it's normative, it's short term, it's proportionate to the danger or the stress. It actually motivates you into action. So moving out of the way when something's flying at you. And the physical symptoms that come with it are temporary. So they're really moment to moment. They don't last constantly or chronically. It's situational. So, like a presentation or a big test, there's a real or threatened danger, and it's functional. So, with a healthy level of anxiety, you can generally go about your day without being limited by the feeling of anxiety. Whereas anxiety that's become disordered is excessive and it's much greater than situational danger represents. So, when we talk about school based anxiety being excessive, things like screaming and running back to their caregiver in response to driving to school or dropping off at carpool, it's persistent. So it continues outside of the actual moment of going to school. And it's dysfunctional. So it prohibits them from actually participating in the things that they would really like to be a part of. So, some facts about anxiety, it's actually fairly common. So, in a most recent report on kids that they surveyed between 2016 and 2019, children ages 3 to 17 were diagnosed with an anxiety disorder at a prevalence of 9.4% of children. So that's almost 1 in every 10 children that has anxiety severe and persistent and dysfunctional enough that they actually qualify for an anxiety disorder diagnosis. And then some distinctions about the types of anxiety that children may encounter or are diagnosed with. So there's separation anxiety, which is the anxiety is caused by a separation from their caregiver. And then there's social anxiety, where it's brought on by social situations. So when we talk about school related anxiety, it could be either one of those. It could be both. It could be that they're anxious because they're not with you. It could be that they're anxious because they're at school. So, understanding the difference and being able to identify what it is precisely about school that's causing your child to be so anxious can help whenever we talk about some of the later intervention strategies, like making our schedules or social stories, can be helpful to tune into what it is precisely about school that's causing anxiety. So some of the signs and symptoms to watch out for to know that your child's anxious: gastrointestinal changes, constipation or diarrhea, sweating, sleep changes, heart racing, headaches, shakiness, crying more than usual or tantruming more than usual, excessive clinginess, changes in stereotypy. So if your child exhibits any type of stimming, seeing a lot more stimming behaviors or different stimming behaviors that are maybe more disruptive to their daily functioning, that's just something to pay attention to as a clue, especially if your child is non-speaking and they're not able to verbalize those emotions. Mouthing objects or self more than usual or more aggressively than normal. And then sometimes our kids can exhibit some aggression either to themselves or others. Some of the risk factors that increase the likelihood of a child experiencing anxiety are not incredibly clear in terms of what a direct cause would be, but we know that trauma contributes. So if your child has ever experienced a traumatic event, that could increase the likelihood that they would struggle with anxiety. Autism, ADHD, being a victim of bullying, learning disorders, having a family history, or a major and abrupt change in their routine. So, and this is for all kids, really. If anything major changes the status quo for them, then anxiety is a pretty normal response. So if your kid meets that and they just started school for the first time and then they've suddenly had this increase in anxiety, that actually makes a lot of sense with what we know about how anxiety typically forms. Some of the treatments that are available for anxiety, I have just a few listed here. There are a lot more, but I know whenever you start maybe considering going to a counselor or a therapist, they'll always have these things listed in their biography to say, um, I use cognitive behavior therapy or I use narrative therapy. Those are just terms for modalities that are used to treat certain disorders. Some of them apply to a lot of different issues, but CBT is a really common one that you'll see. Focuses on correcting cognitions and then changing your behavior. Exposure therapy for kids with anxiety is very common. So, gradually increasing their exposure to the thing that causes them to be anxious. And then family therapy. So, if you did decide that you wanted to go and see a therapist as a family to address anxiety, emotionally focused therapy is one that you may see a therapist offer, which is shown to be really effective for helping families cope together. And then lastly, medication. So you can always consult with your child's doctor if you think they may benefit from the use of anxiety medications. Um, and that's always something to consider. So when we're talking about anxiety for kids, most of the time they're feeling something in their body somewhere, and they don't always have the language to express it. So, identifying that sensation with your child can be very empowering to them. So, asking them or paying attention to whether they indicate some discomfort somewhere in their body. You can even show them this visual is sometimes helpful for kids to say, does your head hurt? Does your tummy feel funny? Um, if they're breathing heavier or panting, alerting them to that and then helping them tune into their breathing. Walking them through progressive muscle relaxation can bring some awareness to their bodies and the feelings that they have physically. You can even do this gradually where you help your child squeeze their toes. You can help them squeeze their fists. Those are all things that you can do alongside them. You can model that for them and show them what it's like to gradually squeeze your muscles and then let them go. You can do deep breathing together. So, practice taking those deep breaths together, resetting your nervous system, and taking in some additional air. You can do this in a fun way. I have a chart later on that we'll look at that gives you some examples of breathing exercises you can do with kids. Bumblebee breaths, where you breathe in and then you breathe out like a bee, where you're making a buzz. That's something that a lot of kids find really fun, and it becomes less grown up to them whenever they can make fun animal noises, if that's something that your kid would enjoy. So, when you're talking to your kid about their anxiety, the first thing you want to do is acknowledge the presence of the anxious emotion and validate it. So, you can say, hey, I can see how school would make you nervous. Or I can see that you're nervous about saying hi to new friends at school. That makes a lot of sense. Meeting new friends is scary sometimes. Getting on their level, offering them the opportunity for eye contact. They may not take you up on it, but just letting them know that you're there, you're on their level, and you're willing to sit with them through it. You can talk to your child about times that they've overcome anxiety in the past or times that they did something scary and they made it out on the other side. You can talk about rituals of connection that you'll have later on. When I say rituals of connection, I'm talking about stuff like, getting home from school and watching an episode of Bluey together. Something that they can look forward to at the end of the event that's causing them anxiety. Slowing down. So, rushing through your morning can actually worsen anxiety. And I know when I say this that we all have a million things that are calling for our attention and our time. If possible, try to prepare as much as you can the night before so that you have a little bit more wiggle room in your morning, that when your child's feeling anxious, you're not all rushing out the door to get to school. There's a little bit of buffer so that you can slow down, get on their level, and talk about what's going on. Create some positive affirmations for your child. So saying, it's okay to feel nervous. I can do this. Or I can be brave. It's okay to mess up. Those are all things that can be really empowering for a child to hear It can be empowering for them to say to themselves if they're able. And you can also model this in the moment. So taking some deep breaths throughout the interaction, keeping an open posture and a relaxed tone of voice. You want to minimize anticipation. So we do want to make sure our kids have some information. So saying, 30 minutes before school starts, 10 minutes before you leave, then 5 minutes, then 1 minute. Hey, we're going to school in 5 minutes, or we're getting in the car in 5 minutes. We're getting in the car in 1 minute. Gradually introducing them to the idea that things are about to change. We're going to get there soon, but making sure that they're in tune with what's happening in a brief window of time. Give them some age appropriate information. So you might need to know who you're dropping them off with, what time you're picking them up precisely, what you'll do after, what the grocery list looks like. But for them and their developmental stage, it may be more appropriate to just give them need to know information. They need to know they're going to school. They need to know who their teacher is. But they might not need all the details of the whole day first thing in the morning. Avoid what if scenarios. So you do want to validate the feelings of worry, but try not to entertain the more complicated what if my friend says XYZ or my teacher makes me do whatever they're afraid of doing. But mainly just tuning into the in the moment here and now can be more helpful if they are feeling anxious. Offer choices if you can. So that can represent empowerment, and some empowerment can go a long way with kids who are feeling anxious. Some choices you might want to include would be choices between what they'll have for breakfast in the morning, or do you want to pack your school bag tonight, or do you want to pack it tomorrow morning? Um, Asking them, about choices that they'll make at school, reminding them that they have some options. You can play with your child. So, pretend play can be a little uncomfortable for us as adults sometimes, but role playing or acting, for our kids who are older, they might want to pretend that they're a movie star or a TV star. So asking them, like, what if we pretended to be a teacher and you be a student, or I'll be the student and you be the teacher, or I'll be a new friend and you be you. Let's pretend like we're meeting each other on the playground. And then having them play that scenario out, that can lessen the anxiety in the real moment later on. And then stay consistent. So, the reality is that sometimes these things just take time to adjust to. And over time, the anxiety lessens as your child learns that the schedule is reliable and they can depend on it. So when it comes to crisis intervention, there's a phenomenon that's known as after school restraint collapse. Sometimes the biggest crisis is at the end of the school day when they've come home and they're just simply burnt out on the rigidity of following rules and having to behave a particular way or listen to their teachers or tolerate being around their peers that they may or may not enjoy being around all the time. And you may notice more challenging behaviors than what they were having at the start of the day or on the weekends. So it's important to recognize that school is actually a really overwhelming place for our kids sometimes. So they're dealing with people who are not you, maybe not their safe people, their favorite people to be around. They're not in their favorite place with their favorite toys or their favorite room. They're following more rules or maybe have more structure or different structure than what they have at home. So it makes a lot of sense that they don't always want to go, and sometimes they don't feel great when they come home. To help mitigate some of this and reduce the risk of a major meltdown when they come home, it can be important to create some time for connection together. So if that's watching a movie, if that's just sitting together and hearing about their day, if that's, looking over homework together, listening to music, sitting outside. All of those are really great opportunities to just connect with your child and reduce the demands that are put on them for just a little while after school. You can also ask for help as a parent. So if your child is coming home every day and they're burnt out and they're exhausted, there's a decent chance that you're also exhausted from that process. So reaching out to your spouse or partner, other parents, or friends, there are Facebook groups for parents that you could join. I have one linked later on. Those are all places that, you can just say, hey, this is really hard, and I'm having a hard time when they're coming home from school, knowing how to handle all the big feelings and emotions that they have. And then preserving downtime, like I already said. So when we're managing meltdowns, you want to know the signs. So some of the symptoms and indicators we talked about earlier. If they're indicating some sensory avoidance, covering their eyes or their ears, stomach aches, restlessness. So know what it looks like when your child's starting to fall apart. Know that they may not respond to you with a lot of logic or reason when they're having a meltdown, and they might not respond to a lot of instruction giving when they are having an anxious meltdown. You want to do some preventative care, so having a quiet place in your house that your child knows they can go when they're feeling overwhelmed. Having some maybe quiet routines, a sensory toy, something that gives them a break that's maybe quiet, darker, or with reduced or low lighting. Just maintaining awareness of the possible triggers that they might be experiencing and trying to reduce their exposure to those things. You always want to assess for safety, especially if when your child is feeling very, very anxious and has a complete meltdown, and it becomes very physical. It can be important to remove any type of sharp, hard, heavy objects from reach. You want to stay as outwardly calm as possible. Avoid yelling or raising your voice because that can escalate the situation. And then once your child gets to a point where you think they'd be able to take a sip of water, or even like touch something cold, that can be a really grounding experience for children to bring them back into their bodies, back into an awareness of the present moment. Let's talk about some tools and strategies that you can use with your kids. Okay, so the first one, this is a visual schedule. So I have an example here. I do these at work using a floppy folder, like any fun color works. Putting a strip of Velcro on the outside of the folder where you can do this. You can put one side says to do, one side says all done. And then inside the folder, storing additional pictures. You can laminate cards, cut them out, stick a piece of Velcro to them, and then stick them on that schedule in the order that your child is going to do their daily activities. So um, this is a really great thing that I think a lot of people have access to, because most of us, we can, go to like an Office Depot. If you don't have a printer at home, you can print off a bunch of pictures that represent activities your child goes through in a day. Pick up a clipboard or a folder, a laminator, and you can really tailor it to your child. So some of the benefits of using a visual schedule are that it provides some routine. So it's predictable. Your child eventually learns that the schedule is set and the schedule is something they can depend on. So when anxiety comes into a child's mind, a lot of time it's out of it's a fear, for one thing, that the thing that they have to go do will harm them or otherwise challenge them in a way that they don't feel prepared for. So giving them a visual schedule, even if your child's not a reader, but they're able to see pictures, they can see these things, know what's coming, know after I do toothbrushing, then I'm going to eat breakfast, then I'm going to get in the car, then I will say hi to my teacher. And you can just rotate those out. You can say, okay, when we come home from school, then we're going to get in the car, then we're going to go to Target. Um, it gives you some time together where you get to talk about their day at the start of the day or before they go to school. You get to talk about their day after school whenever they get in the car, whenever you pick them up. It can also give them a visual for those transitions that we were talking about earlier. So rather than just saying, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to get in the car and go to school, or in 5 minutes, we're going to pack your bag, you can actually show them. You can say, hey, look at your schedule. In 5 minutes, this is what we're about to do. Can also make it your kid's schedule. So this is something that's completely customizable. There's so much clip art for free on the internet. Some really unique pictures that you can pull up, whatever represents your child's day, you can pretty much find it with like a Google image search. It also can increase independence eventually. So where I've seen children use this independently, and I'm thinking of one kiddo in particular that I've worked with where we implemented the visual schedule, and over time, this kiddo got to where they could actually tell us, hey, I actually don't want to go outside to play next. I want to look forward to going to the alligator room to play on the seesaw. And they were able to take their cards and move them around. And sometimes that was a little bit funny. Sometimes we'd negotiate a little bit and say, I know you want to go outside, but look, first we've got to do toothbrushing. But having that visual was something to redirect them to that actually decreased their anxiety overall because they could visualize what they had to look forward to. So as you set up a schedule, here's some steps to follow. So the first thing you want to do is just pen and paper, write out what are the key events that your child needs to know. So is it school? Is it carpool? Is it recess? Is it lunch? At the start of the day, is it packing their bag, eating breakfast, getting dressed? Include the transitions, so driving in the car, walking, and the rest time, so meals, things like that. Break down those bigger events, especially the ones that cause more anxiety for them, into smaller ones. So school might not be just one card to represent a school building. It might be that you break it down into saying hi to teacher, walking to class, going to speech, going to OT. All of those things you may want to break down and have their own little card to represent them on the schedule. And you may even want to make it a more fun icon. So you may let your child pick out the picture for themselves to represent the event that they're particularly anxious about. So identify some positive tasks and events that are related to home after they get home. So this could be toys, snacks, games, a comfy chair, whatever it is that your kid loves about home. Have some things that they can put in their folder that they can see on their visual schedule, to just kind of motivate them to remember that there's something good after they ride the wave of anxiety out of school. And then consistency is really key here. So just continually implementing it. It can take time for kids to adjust to a schedule, but the repetition really does reinforce that the schedule is reliable and they can depend on it. Another intervention I love to use with kids that are struggling with anxiety is social stories. So social stories are really helpful for a lot of different social scenarios. You can adjust these to your child's developmental level. So for some, they may need simpler, shorter sentences. For others, they might be able to tackle more complicated concepts. You really could make a social story with just printing off the paper and stapling it together. You could get fancy, put it in a binder with some sheet protectors. You could hand draw it if you wanted to, honestly. If your kid wanted to draw the pictures for the social story, that could even be a really great experiential activity for them to do. So you want to identify what is it that is particularly causing distress? What's the moment that causes anxiety for my kiddo? And then create a really simple story that's written in first person that emphasizes their bravery, their autonomy, and individuality throughout whatever the situation is that's scaring them. And then you can include pictures for some added clarity. So first you want to identify your goal. So is your child just generally worried about school? Is it about the meals at school? Whatever it is, figure out what's causing the distress and then keep it really simple. So keep your sentences short, to the point, and be really descriptive and include some positivity. So reassurance, positivity, affirmations, those are all important parts of a social story. So I wrote a social story for you guys as an example of what you might use with your kiddo if you're talking about school. So here's my social story. So going to school. My name is Chessie. Today I'm going to school. I'll go to school with Josh. That's my husband. We'll leave the house together in the morning. I might feel a little excited and a little nervous. At school, I'll see my professor. Her name is Dr. Osborne. I'll also see my classmates. Some may say hi to me. If I'm feeling shy, I could take a deep breath and wave at them. It's okay to feel nervous when I go to school. If I feel overwhelmed, I can ask Dr. Osborne for help. When school is over, I will see Josh again. I can talk to him about my day and what I learned. I'm ready for school. Today I will try my best and ask for help when I need it. So this is a social story that is easy to replicate for your kid. You can insert their name, their teachers' names. You could replace Josh for mom or dad or aunt, uncle, whoever. And repeating this over and over and over again kind of gives them a script to follow to say, okay, my friends are going to say hi to me. That might make me nervous, or my teacher might wave. I know I can refrain from saying hi back. Maybe I can wave, take a deep breath. I can ask for help. It builds in things that they're going to really experience and then gives them some strategies to use. And with repetition, our kids start to pick up on these things. I don't know if you've ever had a kid that just really latched on to one episode of Bluey or one particular song, and after they'd heard it a few times, they could just repeat it. That's kind of what social stories do. They give our kids something that they can repeat and then replicate in the real world. Some mindfulness techniques that you can use would be breathing exercises. So, breathing in deeply, blowing out through your mouth slowly. This is a chart that I think is really fun for kids to have choices to say, do you want to do bubble breaths or do you want to do bee breaths? So giving them visuals with that can be helpful too. And then doing it with them. So doing it yourself to show them how to breathe in deep, how to let go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a grounding technique that can be helpful if your child's starting to feel a little anxious. So when they say, "Oh, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to sit by this person. I don't want to eat this meal." Saying, "Hey, let's hold on to that thought for a second and let's find 5 things that you can see. Okay, let's find 4 things that you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste." That's something that I use with adults, I use it with kids, and can just be immensely helpful for getting them back into the present moment. Some ways to adapt mindfulness to your kids' specific needs. Chair yoga is something that requires no lower extremity mobility. There are lots of videos on YouTube of chair yoga. That's something that they have videos for kids as well if you want something that's more tailored to things that would keep a child's interest. And then adaptive journaling. So drawing pictures, finger painting, collaging. Those are all things that help your child process, use different parts of their brain, can help them kind of ground themselves at the end of the day and reduce anxiety for the next time they have to go back to school. Sensory activities can also be great for after school to reduce some of that restraint collapse. So a water bin, making your own kinetic sand with cornstarch and oil and sand, making a stress ball together, and then playing with those activities for a little bit can be another way to build some motivation for going to school and staying at school because they know they have some fun sensory activity to engage in when they get home. A few books that I love to recommend. One is Bitsy Bat, School Star. So this is written by an autistic adult about Bitsy Bat going to school, and her needs are really different than the other animals at school. But her teacher responds to her by helping her find what helps her fit at school and then celebrating the things that make her different. This book I think is great for like elementary to middle school age kids. It's got some really wonderful pictures. And it's a really wholesome story that can be really encouraging. And you can talk to your child about what Bitsy experiences at school, how nervous she is about going back to school, and maybe relate it to their experiences. A Little Spot of Worry is another great one. Ruby Finds a Worry. The Color Monster is a pop-up book about different emotions. So that can start dialogue about emotions or even just give your child some emotional language to say, I feel sad, I feel happy, I feel scared. And then Wonderfully Wired Brains is one that I love. It's basically a kid's encyclopedia to neurodiversity. So it has a section on anxiety, it has sections on autism and ADHD and dyspraxia, dyslexia. It's something that your child may just want to enjoy for themselves. You may also enjoy reading it for your benefit with your child because it does have just wonderful scientific information in it about neurodiversity and different mental challenges developmental challenges, learning disabilities. But it's worded in a way so as kids can relate it to themselves and their peers to help them understand their own minds and the minds of other people in a way that's accessible to them. So then some books for grown-ups. The Anxiety Coach is one that's a program that parents can implement with their own children to help coach your child through anxiety. It's also helpful if your child has obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of strategies that help with anxiety are also helpful for OCD. The Whole Brain Child is another book that I love to recommend because it's really about nurturing your child from a developmental perspective. The Opposite of Worry is another one for parents. And then How to Tame My Anxiety Monster is for kids, but it's great to read for adults alongside your child as well. So the internet is full of things. I'm sure if you Googled how to help my child with anxiety, you would be flooded with information, and that can be overwhelming. It's also important to know when you're looking at resources or when you're hearing stuff from people like myself, not everything that I have to offer is going to fit for your child the way that I've presented it. And you may need to tailor strategies to your kid's specific needs. So, just a few resources that are available. The Mayo Clinic Anxiety Coach is a tool that was put up by the Mayo Clinic based on the book that I mentioned, The Anxiety Coach. This is something that gives you a step-by-step guide to walking your child through exposing them to things that cause them a lot of anxiety. It's meant for you to apply as a parent. You may need help from a mental health professional if you're struggling to make it work for your kids. So that with your kiddo, then by all means try. And if it's not working, that's okay. Not everything is going to fit for every kid. There are books on YouTube. So the books that I mentioned for kids earlier, a lot of those are read on YouTube. And you can find a YouTube video of them reading it if you didn't want to buy the book. Worry Wise Kids is another great website that addresses anxiety. And then Sesame Street has an app for kids called Breathe, Think, Do. That's meant for kids to use themselves. It's pretty cute, and I believe it's free on the App Store. A few local resources to be aware of. This is the parent stress line number. So I put this up in big letters so you can write it down. It'll also be in the slide deck. I've called this number just to verify the usefulness of it. It's not a crisis hotline, but it is a warm line. So it's 24/7. And what it's designed for is just what it says. If you're experiencing a high amount of stress in caring for your kid and you're feeling the burden of that, and you just need someone to talk to for a moment to say, hey, I'm having a hard time keeping an open posture and a nice voice. And I just raised my voice at my kid and I feel terrible about doing that. This is somewhere that you can call, just talk to somebody to process through it. But in an emergency, always remember that you should dial 911 in a emergency crisis situation. Some of the local mental health supports that I want you to be aware of are the Jewish Family Center offers a sliding scale fee counseling service. So that means that it's based on your income. I will be the last person to say, hey, you just need to go get counseling for your kid because counseling can be really expensive. Thankfully, there are some agencies in the area that know that, and they've tried to reduce the cost of professional counseling to make it as accessible as possible. Jewish Family Center, you do not have to be Jewish. Their goal is really for anyone to receive counseling if they need it. The Loyola Center for Counseling as well is the same type of cost. So it's based on your income. You can look at their rates. And they offer services for individuals, couples, and families. So the LA Disability Talk Facebook group I have linked here. It's free to join. And then Catholic Charities offers school-based counseling, and there's some information about that as well. So that's all I have for the slides, and we do have a little bit of time left. If you have questions that you didn't want to put in the chat, feel free to email me at that email by all means. But I'll turn it, let's see, Sharon, do you want to look at the questions and read, maybe pick one and read for me?
I don't have any questions in the chat yet, but everybody, if you have a question, please drop it in the chat or feel free to open your mic and do that. I had put a comment in the chat myself that about the anxiety not always being bad. It's something that we don't think about. It does cue us, if you're really anxious about a big test, it could be because you need to study more, so all anxiety is not bad. It really does serve a purpose. So we just need to keep it in a manageable form. Any other questions for Chessie? We have her captive for about 10 more minutes. So I did drop the survey link in the chat box, so that is there. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and click on that and be taking the little 4 or 5 question survey for us while we talk. I thought the presentation was wonderful, Chessie. Thank you so much for that information. That was really well put together and had a lot of great practical resources and ideas. And I'm all about practical, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you guys for having me. I've loved getting to look closer at some of this stuff. I have to apologize. They're mowing grass right outside my window right now, so
We can't
sorry if
hear
you
it.
can
I
hear that.
can't.
Okay, great. But this is something I'm really passionate about, and I understand that with kids with disabilities, you're already dealing with a lot of services and a lot of providers, and sometimes just using those things that you can at home is the best that you can do, and that's okay. That is okay if that's what you can do for your kid right now.
Yeah, so many kids with disabilities, a lot of disabilities sort of automatically come with an anxiety issue. So, so it really does just, and for parents, it seems to be adding insult to injury, because we're already dealing with so many things for our kids and, working through so many things with them. And to add something like anxiety on top of that, sometimes it's just paralyzing for a parent. So it's really nice to have some hands-on things, some active, practical things that we can try. I liked the bit about the kind of de-stressing at the end of the school day. Sometimes and for our kids, we may take 4 hours doing homework in the evenings, and that is ridiculous. But as a result, we're anxious about our kid getting through their homework. So as soon as they walk in the door, it's like, get on your homework, and they need time to settle themselves. Some of these kids have held it together all day, and it is all they can do to function for that 7 or so hours every day around people, and they're just at their limit. So the last thing they need to do is to come home. And I also want to put in a plug here. You can ask for homework accommodations on your 504 or your IEP. If you need to know more about that, please call us or your local Families Help and Family Center. That is a tool that you can use if you find that you are spending countless hours every evening doing homework because your child takes so much time, and it's adding to their anxiety, and they're not able to be a kid, and it's just making things so much worse. Please call us. So this is something I just found out recently. So call us and we'll be happy to talk with you more about that. Uh, Learn something new, Wallace said. I'd like to hear more in the future about handling siblings' anxiety. You know what? I totally get that. My daughter is 11 and she does not have a disability, and my son right now is driving her bananas. And it is causing her stress because he's keeping her awake at night he doesn't talk, he has autism and other significant complex disabilities and healthcare issues, and we just can't figure out how to get him sleeping. So right now he'll wander around the house. Her room's right next to his. The bathroom's across the hall. He shines the bathroom light in her face. She can't sleep with the door closed because that increases her anxiety even more. So, so maybe that would be a great webinar for us to do sometime. I would really love to figure out more about sibling issues because it's something that we've been dealing with for a while as well. So I appreciate those comments. And honestly, some of the things that Chessie mentioned may actually work for siblings. One thing that I'm thinking about doing is just trying to spend specific time with my daughter. Now we spend plenty of time with just her because my son is out with his helpers and stuff, and he's out of the house a good bit, but I want to do things like take a vacation with her, and have him go do something else because she needs time to do things that he may not either not be interested in or not able to do because of physical limitations that should not hold her back. So we're looking at doing some things like that and to have some time that is just devoted to her without talking about him at all. Because our kids with disabilities um, really do take up a lot of our energy. So unscrew the light bulb. Well, that would be a good idea, except that we have lighting that we can't do that with. I was just thinking that would be great. No, we can't do that in that room. But I tell her door closes, or at least she can push it to where it doesn't shine right in her face. I've offered her a different room. We have another bedroom, and she declined. And I said, if you're not going to take any of my suggestions, then you're going to have to live with it. I've tried everything. So anyway, but thank you, Chessie. If you guys have any questions, I will be emailing you the slide deck. And so you'll have Chessie's email. Send those directly to her. She's very reachable and responds pretty quickly to emails. So thank you again. Y'all don't forget to do the my goodness, the survey that I dropped in the chat box. Please click on that link before we go out. And I hope you'll join us again very soon. Chessie,
Thank you
enjoy your
guys.
afternoon.
Thank you.